So let's jump into Luke 15. I think that's where we'll go next. And this has got to be one of the better known chapters in the book of Luke. Or maybe Luke 2 is better known, but the story of the prodigal son is well known. So I've sent out some notes about it. Really, it contains 3 stories of lost things. Let me get my own notes. That would help me. The point of these stories is to reveal God's heart towards people who are lost. So I think you can watch for that. I'll read through it, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Luke 15, verse 1. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes murmured, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with him." So he told them this parable. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he's lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost." Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin which I had lost." Just so I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. And he said, there was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that falls to me." And he divided his living between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in loose living. And when he had spent everything, a great famine arose in that country, and he began to be in want. So he went and joined himself to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have fed on the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was yet at a distance, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to make merry. Now his elder son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what this meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother has come, And your father has killed the fatted calf because he has received him safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, Lo, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your living with harlots, you killed for him the fatted calf. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to make merry and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. What a great chapter. Stories about lost things as a response. This is where Jesus is responding to the fact that tax collectors and sinners are gathering around him. Maybe you remember from 2 weeks ago, Jesus has just given a sermon on the cost of discipleship and what it will be like to follow him and how difficult it is and what a challenge it is. And in response to that, he gets people gathering around him who are ready to pay the price, people who know they need him, people who know they need grace. These are stories of grace, of those who are lost, that is the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son, the one who owns them, seeking them until he finds they're very precious, very precious. And they are shown great honor, even though they haven't earned that honor. That's what grace is. And it's interesting, the book of Luke doesn't actually contain the word grace, but it has over and over again illustrations of grace. And I think the prodigal son is one of the best illustrations of grace in the Bible. Notice there's a progression. The first story is 1 in 100, and the second story is 1 in 10. By the time you get to the third story, it's 1 in 2. And in every case, the one who's lost is precious, is precious. So he starts, he's mostly talking to Pharisees. He's talking to people who are criticizing him for hanging out with people who are notorious sinners. And so he starts out by talking to them at a level that they can understand. None of them will be shepherds, but probably lots of them own sheep and have hired shepherds. And so they know the pattern. And if a shepherd is responsible for 100 sheep, if he comes back with one missing, the shepherd pays for it. If one's missing, that's really important to the shepherd. He cares. Every shepherd would go looking for that one lost sheep. And I mean, sheep are not very smart, right? They go wandering. They don't know. What is the sheep thinking? He doesn't even know he's lost. He's just wandering around, grazing. If you ask the sheep, what are you doing? You say, well, you look around and say, I guess I'm looking for my shepherd. The shepherd's not lost. It's the sheep that's lost. Have you ever talked to people about spiritual things and they say, yeah, I care about spiritual, I'm searching for God. I'm searching for God. Newsflash, God's not lost. You are. People who are lost, lots of them don't know they're lost. And God goes searching for us when we're lost. The best thing to do is to find the sheep. You could find the remains of the sheep if a wolf has eaten most of it. Then you bring the remains home and you show the owner, sorry, your sheep got eaten by wolves. The owner takes the loss then. The best thing is to find the sheep, and you're so happy, you pick it up and you carry it home. And all the other shepherds who looked after the 99 while you were searching, they're all everybody rejoices. This is the best possible thing when a sheep is lost, to find it. So up to that point, all the Pharisees are perfectly comfortable with this. And suddenly Jesus says, if you're so concerned about a lost sheep, why are you not so concerned about a lost person? Let me tell you, when a lost person repents and comes back to the Lord, the angels in heaven dance and rejoice. Your priorities are wrong. Then he shifts to the next story, the lost coin, 1 in 10. Now, almost none of the people listening to him will be women, so that's harder for them to relate. But everybody knows if a woman has 10 silver coins and she loses one, she'll look for it. Of course she will. That's precious to her. And what I've written in my notes is you can imagine a single mom on welfare. If somebody gives her a stack of $100 bills, she knows exactly what she's going to do with each one of those $100 bills. And if one of them's missing, she'll tidy the house and sweep the house and turn on the lights, and she'll look and she'll tell her friends, I'm missing one of my $100 bills. And when she finds it, she celebrates. That's precious to her. And Jesus says, just the same, the angels in heaven celebrate when a lost person is found. So now the Pharisees are a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because they're not good at celebrating lost people. They exclude them. And that's why they were complaining about Jesus. You're supposed to be an up-and-coming rabbi. Don't hang out with these people. They're unclean. You'll contaminate yourself. And that's wrong thinking. And Jesus wants to make it clear. That's wrong thinking. That's not the heart of God. So then he tells a story that's much harder to take if you're a legalist. The story of the prodigal son. Lots of people have kids who are prodigals, kids who are non-compliant, kids who are rebellious, kids who turn their back on their parents and run away. That is a common pattern in every culture in the world. And it's offensive to the parents. And sometimes there's nothing you can do about it except agonize. And maybe some of the Pharisees had prodigal kids. I don't know. But he tells the story. And when this guy's very insulting to his father, he asks for his share of the estate before the father dies. He essentially says, I consider you dead. Just give me the cash. And he goes to a far country where nobody knows who he is and nobody's going to criticize him, and he blows the money. He's the bankroll for the alcoholics and the partiers in that town. And as soon as the money's gone, his friends disappear. Nobody cares for him. He ends up feeding pigs. If you're a young Jewish boy and you end up feeding pigs, it doesn't get lower than that, right? Pigs are unclean and they really stink. If you're looking after pigs is not a nice job. And I can imagine him sitting in the pig pen, looking at the food that the pigs eat. You think, they're getting more food than I am. He's starving to death. And the question comes to him, doesn't anybody care about me? And he knows, even though he's been awful to his father, he knows his father. He knows that his father still cares about him. So then he says, I'm not fit to be a son, but maybe dad would take me back as a hired servant. Then at least I'd have food to eat. And so he goes back broken and repentant. So the trouble is, if you're a Pharisee and you know the Old Testament and you know Deuteronomy very clearly spells out what you do with a rebellious son. You bring him before the elders of the community and say, this is a rebellious son. He's been drinking. He won't do what he's told. And he is to be stoned to death to purge the evil from the community. So even as the son walks back towards the father's village, he is in danger. And the father runs to meet him and protect him before the villagers get to him. From the community's point of view, the father's behavior at that point is disgraceful. It's a strange twist of the word grace. The Father is extending unbelievable grace to that child, to that son. And yet from the community's point of view, from a legalist point of view, from an Old Testament point of view, that is disgraceful behavior. So already the Pharisees are uncomfortable. This is not how you're supposed to behave. He extends, not only does he forgive him, he doesn't take him back as a hired servant. He interrupts the guy's repentance speech, and he says, put a robe on him, put shoes on his feet, and a ring on his hand. Shoes are what the family wears. Servants are barefoot. When you put a ring on his hand, that means I'm now giving you the authority of our family. Not only are you a son, I trust you to carry the authority of our family. That is a position of grace that he has not earned. It is not fair. It is grace. So then Jesus goes on with the story. He brings in the elder son. The elder son has been faithful and obedient and hardworking and compliant. He's been just the right son that you all wish you had. And he's offended at the way his father has treated his younger brother. And he has a point. The younger brother does not deserve that. If you're a stickler for justice, grace is offensive. It's not fair. But the younger son knows something about the father's heart that the older son hasn't learned yet. The younger son knows that the father loves him and values him. I don't think the older brother knows that his father loves him and values him. He's so focused on obeying and duty and working hard that he forgets who his father is. He forgets what his father longs for. He says, you never gave me a kid. What do you mean I never gave you a kid? Everything in the estate that's left here is yours. There's kids there. You imagine what would have happened if the older son one weekend had said to his dad, let's have a party. Let's invite people. Let's just celebrate God's blessings in our life. And we might or might not say anything about my younger brother who's far away, but God has really blessed us. Let's have a party and celebrate together. The father would have said, sure, let's do it. Let's do it together. But it doesn't cross your mind if you're a legalist and you're resentful and you're focused on justice. So then the Pharisees are left squirming. Do they want to identify themselves with God, who extends grace to someone who's lost? They're much more comfortable identifying with the elder brother. And Jesus stops the story before we know how the older brother responds. I wonder what verse 33 would say. And he deliberately does that with parables. He stops them and says, you get to decide. What would you do? Where do you put yourself in the story? And there are people who put themselves in the position of the prodigal son. That's how they've behaved with their lives. And there's people who put themselves in the position of the older brother, who's always obedient, always doing right, but doesn't have room in his heart to forgive and extend grace to someone who's broken and repentant. And we are to have the Father's heart. That's what God has. Each one of us is so precious, even if we've done stupid things. I quote, and I can't tell you the name of the guy who gave it to us. It was at a men's retreat I was at years ago, and he was one of the BC Lions. And he was talking to us about God's attitude towards us. And he said, God's attitude towards us is the same attitude I have towards my 3-year-old son. And the quote is, I love you, but sometimes you do the dumbest things. I never forgot that. I love you, but sometimes you do the dumbest things. Because God says that to me. And that's what the Father is saying to the Son. to his younger son, I love you, and you've done some dumb things, and I'm ready to forgive you. You're repentant. He's saying the same thing to the older brother. To be so focused on what's just and what's mine and making money and that kind of thing, that breaks the father's heart. What's the number one thing the father says to the older son? Son, you are always with me. That's what God longs for. He longs for us to be with him. What did the younger son understand about his father's heart? What did the older son understand about the father's heart? What would verse 33 say? How does the story end if you're part of the story? To me, this chapter challenges me to extend grace to people who don't deserve it. And we are called to that, right? Sometimes our friends do dumb things and say dumb things and we're offended, and we need to extend grace to them. And there's people in our community who need that grace. And we as a church, not us individually, but the church of Jesus Christ in general, is not famous for doing that well. We pray that we as a community, as the Rock Christian Fellowship, will be famous for welcoming people who haven't earned the welcome, but they need it. They're precious in God's sight.